Hello everyone, I welcome you to the webinar on open book examinations in English language. This will be an experience sharing session by Dr. Ramani PM. He is a consultant in English studies. Dr. Ramani is a ELT specialist, curriculum developer, teacher trainer, ELT administrator, and a quality assurance expert in education sector. He has a PhD degree from Madras University for his work on teaching English literature to ESL learners at the undergraduate level in India, and is currently an English studies and educational consultant in Chennai. A teacher of over 4 decades with teachings and administrative assignments in India and Middle East, he has taught a wide range of courses in English language and literature using innovative ways of teaching and assessment, including open book examinations. Dr. Ramani has been associated with ELTAI, that is English Language Teacher Association of India, for over 4 decades, promoting the courses of the association in various ways as Vice President, member, its executive committee, and chief editor of its bi-monthly journal, Journal of English Language Teaching. We welcome you, sir. It's an honor to have you here. So I would like to ask you to share your experiences with respect to open book examination in English language. Over to you, sir.
Thank you, Prakar. In traditional closed book exams, the emphasis is on memorization and recall. Because the questions asked in closed book examinations generally are highly predictable. You can expect what type of questions you are likely to get in the final examination. And there are hundreds of study guides and bazaar guides which give you pre-digested form essays, which most students, except the ones who can write on their own, think on their own, used to memorize and reproduce them in the examinations. And some of these guides will also give you variants of the same question, and then they'll say refer to the answer to the previous question. So, which means for 4 or 5 different types of questions on the same issue, for example, the character sketch of so-and-so, the answer will be the same. Students can take these exams and get reasonably good scores. Nobody will fail, of course, because even if you write the summary of the plot, you're expected to be given 40% of the maximum marks for that question. So no one will fail. Everybody passes. It makes everybody happy. Teachers aren't worried because they won't be questioned why somebody has been given only this much of score. As long as people pass, the pass rate is higher, nobody will bother. But in the open book exams, on the other hand, the emphasis is not on memorization and reproduction of pre-prepared essays, but the emphasis is on a higher level of understanding of the text that you study, that you are taught in the classroom, and a higher level of learning, which is of course the main objective of any educational program. Because of this primary difference between the closed book exams and open book exams tend to be more challenging if they are designed in the right way. Even if you have the textbooks on hand, notes, other reference materials, it becomes difficult. Basically, the aim of an open book exam is to find out what students have learned rather than whether they can locate some information in the textbook or reference materials. So the focus is not on trying to locate information quickly in the given time, but to use that information to know where you can find information, to locate it quickly and use it to answer the question that is put to you. And the candidate should remember that the time given for answering the open book question does not allow for rereading the textbook afresh or reviewing your notes or finding new information. Only if you are thoroughly familiar with the text and the notes that you have made and whatever reference materials you have, you won't be able to answer the question. So with this brief recall of the basic difference between the two kinds of examination, just to refresh your mind, I'd like to proceed to give you some actual examples of open book questions that I set when I taught in a well-known college in Chennai years ago. This was a question set for the BA English Literature major students. This is on Emma, the novel, Victorian fiction. You can read the question, but if the print is small, I'll read it out for you. Read the first 2 pages of the opening chapter of Emma. What do you gather about the greatness of Jane Austen as a novelist? You may point out places which throw light on the following aspects. Number 1, absence of verbosity, that is, using more words than are necessary. That's the meaning of verbosity. Power of characterization. Again, the scope is clearly indicated under the following heads. Capacity to give clear-cut ideas about her characters, efficient use of dialogue, introducing all the important characters in the first chapter itself, and any other aspect of her style that strikes you. How is this different from an open or closed book examination? The closed book exam, you'll only get the first sentence. Write an essay on the greatness of Jane Austen as a Victorian novelist. That's all. Write an essay in 300 words or 400 words on Jane Austen as a great Victorian novelist. This question forces the candidate to be familiar with Jane Austen as a novelist, with particular reference to the first 2 pages of the opening chapter. So they have to give evidence from the first 2 pages of the novel for all the aspects of her success as a novelist that is given. So the scope of the answer is indicated clearly. The candidates has to locate quotes or parts of sentences, parts of the text, sentences, which will support the point that they are making about Jane Austen as a novelist. They cannot do Google search at the time of examination. If this exam were to be given online, they can't find the answer themselves very quickly. At the BA literature level, you will be allowed only the textbook, not the reference materials or notes. Next, another example of open book question on the same novel. The novel Emma is full of irony. The heroine feels overconfident regarding her judgment, but that she is invariably wrong is proved by several circumstances. Then she is shocked and perplexed. Quote a few important sentences from at least 3 passages where you meet Emma in such a perplexed state. So you're not asking for the character of Emma. The traditional closed book exam will ask the question, attempt a character sketch of Emma or describe the character of Emma. But specific aspects of a character are indicated in the question, and the student has to focus only on these aspects. How she is overconfident about making judgments about other people, and how she is proved wrong by the circumstances that follow, and that makes her shocked and perplexed. Why is it happening to me? So they have to go through the text and find evidences, 3 places, 3 passages where they have to quote, not entire passages, but relevant sentences in support of their point of view. Let me move on to 2 examples from another novel. Next. This is on Wuthering Heights, one of my favorite novels. Hindley Earnshaw's character is made of many strands. You're not asking for character sketch of Hindley Earnshaw. The question states that the character is made of many strands. 3 of them are frustration at his father's partiality towards Heathcliff, recklessness after his wife's death, and hatred for Heathcliff. These are the three important aspects we want to focus on in this question. Quote three passages elucidating these three traits. Mention the chapter and page numbers and quote a few lines at the beginning and the end of each passage to show that you are familiar with the text, you have understood the text, you can relate these passages to the three strands of the character. Next. Wuthering Heights is a serious novel, but now and then there is comic relief. The closed book exam will focus only on the first part. Write an essay on the comic relief provided by the novelist in Wuthering Heights. Point out at least two places where you come across such a comic relief and quote a few sentences from both. The next part of the question. Describe the tragic scenes which precede such a relief. Do you think that using this device, that is comic relief, adds to the merit of the novel or vice versa? I'm not directing the student to take a particular point of view. I'm saying that it may be that this is a successful device or it may not be a successful device from the point of view of the candidate. So whatever it is, they have to give justification based on their understanding of the text. Now these are the four examples that I gave for BA Literature students. And we used to give question banks to the paper setters who happen to be external people. They were not set by the teachers themselves. And the external paper setter was asked to choose from a question bank that we used to send along with the question paper pattern. And we used to revise this, update this question bank every year so that the questions don't become predictable as in a closed book exam after 2 or 3 years. Next, I'll move on to 2 or 3 examples of open book questions that I set for the master's program in education in the Middle East, in the Republic of Yemen, that I taught for 6 years. The course was on teaching methods, testing and evaluation, 2 or 3 courses, etc. Look at this question. It's in 2 parts. Many college level entrance exams in English include multiple choice tests of grammar and vocabulary. What are the consequences of this practice for an educational policy aimed at promoting communicative language teaching at the secondary school level? So they should understand the aim and purpose and the designing of grammar questions and vocabulary questions. They must have an understanding of how multiple choice questions are set. They should be able to evaluate whether the distractors are true distractors for every multiple choice question. They should also be familiar with educational policies and changes in policies. They should be familiar with other methods of teaching English language, but a particular reference to communicative language teaching at the secondary school level. So all this knowledge they have to bring to bear to answer this question. What kind of an entrance admission test would you suggest for selecting students for the B.Ed or the M.Ed program? Discuss the specifications of such a test and the basis of your specifications. So you can see for yourself how challenging these questions are, even at the master's level. Next example, please. Suppose you need to develop a test of speaking ability that must be administered to several thousand individuals in many different locations at the same time, such as your secondary school leaving examination. Although an oral interview is not possible, you want to make sure that the testing method you use will yield results that are comparable to those you would obtain from an oral interview. So the criteria for assessing speaking skills, the knowledge of this is expected from the student. What other testing techniques might you think of? Discuss your options with justifications for your choices. At the master's level, they can bring reference books, resource materials, their class notes, and yet they won't be able to consult one another. They won't be able to get from anybody else. They have to think for themselves. The last example set for the master's program. Do you believe that there is an urgent need to improve the English language teaching practices at the primary or secondary level? Assuming that you do, what kind of research input in your view will facilitate such an improvement? Discuss the issue elaborately, drawing on your knowledge of applied linguistics, methods of teaching English, studies of curriculum development, as well as your knowledge and experience of teaching English as a second or foreign language. Students who join the master's program in education are supposed to have had some experience of teaching before they apply for admission to these courses. So they can draw on their own experience of teaching. They can draw on all these kinds of information and then answer the question. Now, based on these sample questions and the experiences that I had in designing and administering these questions, I'm going to move on to the second part of my presentation. Designing open book exams. This is for the teachers. How can teachers design questions that are more suited for open book type of exams than closed book type? Design scenario-based questions that require students to apply their knowledge to different scenarios. Not a predictable situation, not a predetermined one. They should be able to apply the knowledge to any scenario that you give. You can use a case study approach or whatever. Design questions that ask students to provide reasoning. This is more important. As I said in the first slide, the aim of the open book exam is not to find out whether the students can locate information in the time given. No. The aim is to find out whether they can use that information which they can access quickly and easily and provide an argumentative piece of writing, giving reasoning, providing evidence, and express their understanding and demonstrate their understanding or apply knowledge to a given scenario. When I showed the examples of open book exams that I actually designed and used, I contrasted each of those questions with the possible alternative closed book exam questions so you could see the difference. Design questions that rely on an understanding of multiple concepts and details learned in the course. Don't focus on only one topic, like what are norm reference tests? What are discrete point tests? How can you test listening ability? No. The open book exam has to integrate several concepts together in the question. Another practical aspect is, as a test designer, the teacher has to make clear his or her expectations about the length of the answer and the scope of the student's response. What kinds of information you want the students to include in their answers. That must be very clear. It cannot be open-ended and vague. And finally, like any other kind of exam, the designer should develop a rubric or a set of expectations for acceptable answers. Very simply speaking, you can Google rubrics in the internet. You can use the rubrics and modify the one that is available for writing a structured essay, argumentative essay, or persuasive essay, because the students have to persuade the reader to accept their point of view, basically. Okay. So we have the content, but the content has to be structured in a certain way, and then there should be some weightage for the mechanics, the grammar, punctuation and spelling, and so on. You can vary the weightage depending on the level at which you set the open book exam. At the bachelor's level, it can be one kind of ratio. At the master's level, it can be a different kind of ratio. Next. If the time is out, please let me know. Oh, okay. Be prepared and organized. These are the two key words. The candidate should create an outline of reference materials. Because it's open book exam, they should not think they can bring everything together. They won't have the time to look through all of them and sort out which one they can use. So they have to decide in advance which reference materials will be useful to them in the exam and then leave the others in their homes. They can place post-it notes with key information in different sections of the textbook, okay, that highlight the character of certain person or the plot, movement, climax, anti-climax in a play, and so on. They have to create summaries and index cards. Basically, an open book type of question requires the candidate to apply the research skills, learn research skills and apply the research skills, finding information, evaluating information, analyzing it, choosing the ones that are relevant, synthesizing the information that they get, all kinds of things. Finally, they should understand the learning materials and be prepared to apply that knowledge. So thoroughness with the textbooks, the course books is the basic requirement. This is first, the previous slide was about the preparation. Now, on the day of the examination itself, taking the open book exam, once you read the question, jot down the important information that is required or facts that are required on a separate sheet of paper. Sometimes the answer book, the last page of the answer book can be used for that. Use effective time management strategies to answer the question. If you have to answer 2 questions in 2 hours, divide the time equally, etc., given the scope of the answer and so on. Structuring the answer is most important. The one who gets the highest score in an open book exam is the one who structured his essay response better than the other candidates. Aim for concise, accurate, thoughtful answers based on evidence. Use quotes sparingly. One of the dangers of open book exam is because I have a lot of content, lot of notes, I have the textbook with me, I'm tempted to quote more and more. I'm tempted to use a lot more of information and detail than is required. So the tendency will be to overdo it, include more content than is required. Be careful. And finally, whatever response you give should be critical. It's not simply copy and paste, cut and paste. So if it is taken from internet resources, the test designer or the examiner should have the right kind of software, which was mentioned by Dr. Bhatnagar this morning, to check the responses for plagiarism and then assess the responses accordingly. So these tips are based on my own experience of designing open book questions. This is the summary slide, which simply recaps the basic difference between the 2 types of questions. Open book exam is not predictable. Closed book exams are predictable.
Thank you, sir. That was a very detailed session about different types of questions that we can have. So one of the questions that we were getting from the audience was, while you have been quoting examples of open book for the theory or maybe the writing part, can we have some example for language skills or spoken communication?
Yeah, I mean, see, open book exam for speaking communication. How is speaking skill taught in classrooms? Usually what happens is we have a course book or resource material which contains say 50 or 100 different dialogues, conversations, okay, at the post office, at the railway station, at the restaurant, and the teachers drill the students in these conversations. But in an open book examination, you don't reproduce any of this, you don't repeat any of these context, okay, you give totally different context. Because English is a skill subject, not a content subject like physics or chemistry or maths. Okay, you don't expect them to remember formulas and apply them to this. It's a skill. If somebody can read a passage on his own and answer comprehension questions, you should be able to read any passage at that level and answer questions. The passage doesn't have to be the same. It can be unknown passage for comprehension. That's why in many examinations, there are 2 comprehension passages. One is an extract taken from one of the prescribed lessons, and the other is unfamiliar. So there are guides which give examples of such unfamiliar passages and so on. Any skill for that matter can be tested in a totally new context. So Or you twist the speaking situation. You go to the railway station. Okay, the taught dialogue says, the reservation clerk says, "Can I help you?" Yeah, I would like 2 berths for this by this train. I'm sorry, I have only 1 berth. One is on the waiting list. The practice dialogue doesn't tell you how to proceed further. Right? It only says, okay, there are 2 berths. I'll take it, pay, get the exchange, money back, and then. But in real life situations, so many new scenarios may develop. That's why I said scenario-based questions. So if out of 3 berths that you require, only 1 is available, what would you do? Continue the conversation.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. So that was a very interesting session and very knowledgeable session as well, sir. So I would like to thank you, sir, for being sharing your immense depth knowledge with us. And it was an honor having you here, sir. I hope this knowledge will be helpful to all the participants, and they can use these learnings in their institutes, in their colleges as well.